If you're so smart, why aren't you rich? It's a question I'm sure a lot of people have asked themselves, and on this show, it was a great way to bring in one of Batman's signature villains, the Riddler. This is the 40th episode in the production order of the series, so it was about time this character was introduced. Voiced by John Glover, he only shows up in a handful of stories. A shame, because whenever he did pop up, it usually made for a pretty good episode, as is the case here. Edward Nygma is the very intelligent creator of a popular video game called The Riddle of the Minotaur. He arrives at work one morning to find out his boss, Daniel Mockridge, has fired him, and since he created the game while under the company's employ, he has no rights to the money made from it. While arguing with Mockridge, he's posed with the question,
if you're so smart, why aren't you rich?
We cut to 2 years later, as Mockridge is attempting to sell assets related to the game to Wayne Enterprises. A riddle pops up in the background that freaks him out, and later, Mockridge is confronted by Nigma in his office. Now calling himself the Riddler, Nigma tries to enact twisted revenge on his former employer, but Batman and Robin intervene. This leads to a life-size version of Nigma's game where the dynamic duo have to solve riddles and avoid deadly traps to save Mockridge in the center of a maze. This episode was one of 3 directed by series co-creator Eric Radomski. He directed 2 other classics that we'll get to later this month. The Riddler's introduction to the series was written by David Wise, whose other writing credits on the show were The Clock King and The Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne. I can definitely see a connection in the tone of all 3 of those episodes, especially with the Clock King story. While the Riddler is one of Batman's most recognizable arch-nemeses, he really didn't show up all that much in the show. The production team was well aware of this, and in the book Batman Animated, the reasoning is laid out in some detail. Quote, a constant frustration to Batman as well as our writing staff, the quizzical Edward Nygma, better known as the Riddler, earned the dubious honor of being our series' most difficult villain. There are at least a half-dozen full or partially completed Riddler stories in our dead script file that proved ultimately too complex or too silly to produce. In a comic book, mystery novel, or live-action drama, the writer has the luxury of time to set up and solve a brain-racking crime. In a 22-minute cartoon, the action has to keep moving, and gimmick-heavy characters like the Riddler have to make their point quickly and get on with it." End quote. I wonder how many of those dead stories were 2-parters. That would have likely given them time to tell a proper, complex Riddler story, but I guess we'll never know. John Glover's voice was the perfect fit for this character, and I think that's apparent throughout the episode. Nygma presents a very cerebral persona, and his superiority complex is evident in every line he reads.
You know what happens to gate crashers? They have to match wits with the Riddler.
That is one of the best reveal shots in the series. I absolutely love how that looks, and with the line delivery, it shows off just how much more serious this version of the character is compared to past interpretations. The design for his costume fits the show great too. This wasn't the first time we saw the green suit and bowler derby used for the character, but it is a bit stripped down here. Only one question mark adorns the Riddler's tie while he maintains his signature staff. There was an early design for the character that featured his original green leotard, but I don't think it would have matched with the tone of this show. However, that didn't stop them from using it later in possibly the worst character redesign for the new Batman adventures. Batman and Robin are in peak dynamic duo form here. I really like how they play off each other to solve the riddles and get through the maze. It shows off how they need to rely on each other sometimes, and I love seeing them figure things out. The design and execution of the maze in the story was really well done, and a big fun obstacle to see our heroes travel through.
Loses a head. I don't know what's worse, the traps or the puns.
This was also memorably adapted in the Super Nintendo game The Adventures of Batman and Robin. Funnily enough, they use a few Super Mario sound effects when Dick's playing the Riddle of the Minotaur game in the Batcave.
But you've got to solve all these riddles.
There's a point where Kevin Conroy voices Bruce's lighter tone and Batman's deeper register back to back. I love when we get to hear that because it shows off just how different those personas were in this era of the show.
Why do multi-million-dollar deals break down in the wasteland?
Of course, any Riddler story isn't complete without the Bat family figuring out the villain's real name.
His name's Nygma. Edward Nygma.
I get it. Nygma.
Mr. Nygma. Edward Nygma.
Spoilers here. After a solid climax, Riddler escapes, which I like. With him still on the loose months later, we see Mockridge, rich after the deal he made with Wayne Enterprises, still scared of the repercussions of firing Nigma 2 years prior and profiting off his work.
How much is a good night's sleep worth? Now there's a riddle for you.
Overall, I really enjoyed this episode. If you think the Riddler is just a goofy, lame secondary villain, check this one out, and it may change your mind.